Have you ever felt like your career goals are just out of reach? Like you're ready to make big moves, but not sure where to start? If so, you're in the right place. Welcome to the 12 Days of Career Goals, the leading online conference for advancing your career and reaching your career goals in 2025. I'm Teresa White, career clarity expert, 5-time certified career coach, and your host of the 12 Days of Career Goals. We are bringing together 21 of the most respected career growth experts to deliver the actionable steps, insider strategies, and confidence you need to land big wins in your career. From exclusive live sessions and video replays to a Slack community of like-minded professionals and practical resources you can implement right away, this conference is packed with everything you need to turn your career dreams into reality. And the best part? It's completely free if you register by December 30th. So grab your spot and let's dive into the 12 Days of Career Goals. Welcome back to the 12 Days of Career Goals. Today, we're diving into one of the most exciting yet challenging moves you can make in your career, making a bold career pivot without starting over. If you've ever dreamed of switching industries, breaking into a new field, or stepping into a role that really excites you, without throwing away everything you've already built, this episode is for you. Get ready to learn how to transition with confidence, leverage the skills you already have, and craft a story that makes your pivot irresistible to future employers. Let's unlock the secrets to making that bold move while staying true to your career goals. Joining me today are Eliana Goldstein and Erica Rivera. Eliana Goldstein is a speaker and coach who works with ambitious individuals to help them find and land well-paid careers. She founded Eliana Goldstein Coaching in 2019 and created the Career Upgrade Framework, a culmination of her experience expediting her own career growth in the corporate world, insights from coaching certification and practice, and the wisdom gained from helping thousands of clients navigate their career struggles. Eliana's insights have been featured on CBS, CNBC, and in the Wall Street Journal, where she empowers individuals with strategies to find more engagement and fulfillment in their careers. Erica Rivera is the founder of the Career Takeover, a movement empowering professionals to reclaim their careers, own their stories, and break free from toxic workplace dynamics. As a certified career coach and resume writer, she helps individuals build powerful career brands and rise into roles that reflect their worth. Focused on mental health and workplace empowerment, Erica inspires clients to lead with confidence and take control of their professional journeys. Welcome, Eliana, and welcome, Erica, to the 12 Days of Career Goals.
Hi, thank you. So excited to be here.
Hi.
So excited to have both of you here. This is going to be amazing.
So excited to be here.
And I want to start with your own
Thank
journey.
you for having us.
Let's start with you, Erica. I know for all of us, career pivots often feel like a daunting leap. Can you share a moment in your own journey when you faced a major career shift or considered one? What fears or challenges did you personally face, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. This
Can you hear us, Erica?
yes, I can absolutely share. I can hear you now. Yeah, I think I cut out for just a moment. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to jump in and talk about my own career pivot here. For me, that was back in 2018. I think big career pivot for me was where I was trying to break out of the restaurant industry. I had been in restaurant and actually fell into restaurant because of the fact that I was lost and didn't really know what I wanted to do with my career. Landed in the restaurant industry after a big surgery and just kind of climbed the ladder from there. Got to a point where I was like, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted of working in restaurants, working crazy hours, missing holidays, birthdays. I had, kiddos. So for me, it was like, I can't keep doing this, but I don't know what it is I can do. I was already in restaurant for over 5 years at that point. And so I'm like, well, where do my skills even transfer? I didn't know. I didn't know how to find out that information. I didn't even know where to start. I just knew I needed to change. And that was really hard to confront that, knowing that I needed to change, but not necessarily knowing how to get there. So that for me was a pivotal moment in my life. Ultimately, though, I was able to make the career transition and I pivoted into tech and then big tech.
That is incredible. Such a big move from the restaurant industry into tech.
Yeah.
Eliana, and hearing this transition story, a lot of people wish they could make a change, like transitioning from the restaurant industry to tech or wherever they are right now. But a lot of people then believe that if you change industry and make such a big pivot, that means starting from scratch. How do you help clients identify their transferable skills that make them competitive even when they're going into a new field? And are there any stories that you can share of someone who leveraged their existing experience in a really new, different way?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, Erica, your story is so relatable, and so many people have been there where you have this experience and want to make this change and just feel like, where can I go from here? And how do I really leverage what I've already built? And I know transferable skills is like the hot topic that everybody always wants to talk about. And I hear it all the time. Well, I don't know what my transferable skills are. And something that I've always really focused on is not just what's transferable, because of course, we all have transferable skills and it's so important to identify what those are, but more so the transferable skills that you want to leverage, because that's going to be really helpful in understanding, okay, how do I move forward, right? So what I often talk about with clients is, rather than the transferable skills that you have, because you inevitably have them, is where are you most engaged in your career? And why are you engaged in those areas? And then generally, where you are engaged, you will be able to uncover skill sets that are transferable to other fields, but it's coming from a place of not just what am I good at and what's transferable, but what do I actually enjoy? And that can be really helpful in directing you, right? So the example that I always give is, let's just say that you are a project manager and you are looking to make a pivot out of project management, whether it's to a different role, a different industry, whatever it might be. And you ask yourself, okay, but where in my role am I the most engaged on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, whatever it might be? And you say, well, I noticed that every year we do this big project where we hire a bunch of seasonal employees during our busy season. And I noticed that I'm really engaged when that happens, when it comes to finding and recruiting people, interviewing them, onboarding them, right? Like there's all these skills going around from a HR and hiring perspective. And even though this is only like 15% of my job, I'm consistently gravitating towards that time of year. Well, that right there showcases some transferable skills around hiring and recruiting and onboarding, right? And simultaneously, it's what engages you. So you know that those are skills that you really want to take and use when you move forward. So that's what I like to focus on. Not just what's transferable, but what truly engages me, and how can I uncover skill sets under where I am engaged.
I love that example, and it is so aligned with the work I do and I live in. And it's so beautiful because, let's say, take that example of someone who wants to move from project management into HR. A lot of times you hear people saying, like, I can't do this, I don't have HR experience. But in your example, you do have experience. You've hired employees, you've onboarded them, you've trained them. You have done all of that, even though you didn't have the role as HR manager or whatever it might be that you're aspiring to, but you have the skill set.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Erica, I'm wondering, because the pressure to then explain, so even though that you know your transferable skills and you know where you want to take them, but a lot of people are really afraid to explain that pivot. And how would you advise someone to frame their story so it's authentic and compelling when they go into interviews or networking, and so that they can really share that they are a great candidate for that role they're aspiring to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to your point, I hear that a lot, from people where it's like, I know I have these transferable skills because we've gone through, the exercise and work of identifying what those are. I know, where ideally I would like to pivot my skill set into, but now how do I tell that story? And so one thing, I like to tell people is that it's part of your career story. So the fact that you have this experience that you've gained, while in your mind you're like, I'm having to explain why I'm pivoting, it's more of let's talk about this in a positive light in terms of what prompted, this change. So when we think about like framework wise, like what was the catalyst for why, this sparked your interest, why you decided you wanted to make this pivot. And, that could be as to what Eliana was saying, was like there's parts of your role that you were doing that you realized you really enjoyed doing. So maybe you saw that you were using a lot of project management skills and you wanted to lean into that. That was the catalyst for you. Then it's like, what is the bridge? And so that second part of your story is like, well, what have you been doing then to really prepare for this transition? And so that's when then you can talk about, I have been doing upskilling in terms of I just took a certification course, or it can be I've been doing shadowing in my current role. I've been able to shadow other project managers. So talk about a little bit of what you've been doing, networking. Maybe you've been taking that step to meet people that are in the places that you want to be. You've joined some communities and groups where those people are that are in the position that you want to be in. Talk about that as the bridge, and then ultimately the destination. So it's like that framework of telling that story of then, okay, why your specific role, why this industry aligns with you. And if you can frame that story that way, where it's like, hey, this is something that I've been interested in. Here is, what prompted this. Then going into this is what I've been doing, to kind of bridge that gap there. And then now I'm excited about this new opportunity because now I'm able to bring, these skills that I have, a unique perspective. And so that part of it tells a powerful story when you are in those conversations. And quite frankly, a lot of times people have said that even people will ask questions because they're interested to learn more about where they're coming from and now that they're trying to make this transition. So that's typically how I would propose going about that.
I love that. It's so powerful to tell a story. It's not just listing your transferable skills, but it's framing it in a story. I wonder, Eliana, are there any thoughts that you wanted to share on that as well?
Yeah, no, I think that everything Erica just said was so spot on. And I think that, there's, as she was saying, that there's a catalyst and that kind of becomes a big part of your story. And I think what people need to recognize too is that when you're going about the process the right way and leaning into making a pivot that's influenced by like what you really enjoy and what you want to do, what you have to recognize is the truth is that's where you probably add the most value, right? And going back to that example of I'm a project manager, but I love hiring and onboarding. Well, I'm not just arbitrarily picking hiring and onboarding. I've now been doing this, even if it's only in a small subset of my role. And I realize like, yeah, I can do all the project management stuff, but where I really thrive and where I really genuinely believe I can add the most value is in this arena, hence why I am pivoting and why I feel so confident that this makes so much sense for me, right? So I think oftentimes people have to lean into their own power and their own confidence to recognize that, yeah, I might not have as much experience as this other person, but this is such an authentic move for me because this is based on me doing some real investigating and understanding. Like I've done all these different things, but here's what I truly love. And here's where I really think I can be the most valuable. That's really important. And I think that you just have to like own your power and your confidence. And really when it comes to pivoting as well, like you're the hiring manager or whoever it is you're speaking to is only going to be confident in you as you are in yourself. So if you're telling the story and you're not so sure and you're saying, well, this is my background and this is the type of experience I have, and you sound like you're doubting yourself, well, then they're going to doubt your ability to make that pivot, right? So you have to go into this and say, this is my background, but here's why I know that this is really what I'm destined to do to a degree. This is why I know that I will absolutely crush it. And I feel so good about this, right? So know that you're coming from a place of this is your value and just be confident about it.
That is so awesome that you're bringing in the confidence in yourself, because just as you said, if you don't believe in yourself, someone else will not believe you either. But if you know the value you bring and then communicate it, others will see it too. And I always talk about telling a pattern of success. So if you
Mm.
are aspiring to go into HR, tell a pattern of success of when you've successfully onboarded employees, when you hired, when you recruited them, when you trained them. And then that pattern of success almost speaks for itself when you share that with a future hiring manager that you're looking to do more of that.
I love that.
And I want to break this down into actionable steps. So if you're thinking about someone who wants to make a career pivot in 2025, Eliana, can you break it down in maybe 3 steps that they should take to really set a strong foundation to make a realistic career transition in the next year?
Sure. Yeah. I think steps are always really helpful because pivots can feel very overwhelming. So the first step, and I think we just touched on it a lot, is doing what I like to call a self-auditing process and really figuring out, okay, based on where I've been in my career thus far, in my current role, in my prior roles, where have I been the most engaged and why? Where have I been the most disengaged and why? What am I noticing? What patterns are coming up, right? Almost like collecting data on yourself to see what is consistently coming up in terms of what I gravitate towards most versus what I gravitate towards least. What is the reasoning behind that? And almost always when you do self-audit, you will notice things that come up and that are pretty reoccurring. And that can be really telling in terms of the direction that you want to go. And then the second step, once you maybe have a semblance of some ideas, but perhaps you're not totally dead set on like one specific path yet, is starting to do some market research. And I like to do market research in the form of networking, right? The best way to get experience in a role that you don't have experience in is to speak to people who are in those roles. So starting to reach out, if I'm exploring 2 or 3 different options, maybe I talk to the people who are already doing those 2 or 3 different options, get a sense for their day-to-day, the scope of their roles. And you can better understand, am I gravitating towards this? Am I not gravitating towards this? Does this feel right? Does this feel wrong? Right. And get as close to, again, doing the role as you possibly can. Of course, you can also do research in the form of reading books on the subjects that you're interested in, podcasts, so many free courses. Like there's just so many free resources out there that you can do to get experience when you can't more traditionally get experience. And then once you have a clear idea of, okay, now I feel pretty set that this is the direction that I want to go, I've really niched down, it's clear on what I'm targeting, then I would work into the last step. And then there are a lot of steps after this. We're talking about the first 3 steps of kind of just the positioning. Okay, how do I now position myself and my brand to showcase why I am in alignment with this position, right? A lot of what Erica talked about, like the story around that, the narrative, my LinkedIn, my resume, making sure that all really aligns with that direction before I take any further steps. Those would be the 3 things that I would think about.
I love that. So first, starting really with that inner work of figuring out where do I want to go and where do I feel most energized and engaged. Then having conversations, and I love that you emphasize is. We'll go back to the example of going into HR. It's not that you have to enroll into a 2-year graduate program into HR. You can start with watching YouTube videos, LinkedIn Learning. 30 minutes, you're already getting some terminology that you're a little bit more familiar with than you were before. And that can already help you have conversations about those topics. And then really telling your story. Erica, are there any thoughts that you wanted to add to those steps?
I think those steps are spot on. I think the only other thing that maybe I would call out is that once you do maybe identify potential avenue, sometimes in terms of skills, doing a skills gap analysis, and so being able to identify, yes, positioning and like making sure we're updating our LinkedIn or resume, but are there areas that we maybe need to kind of tell the story and bridge the gap, so to speak? So like you were talking about, do I take some YouTube trainings? Do I go on LinkedIn and take some trainings? And how can I maybe add some of that into either my resume? Sometimes it's just part of saying when you're in the interview that, recently you've had the opportunity to do XYZ. So I think that part of it is really important, because if you're seeing a trend and a theme across different roles and the skill set that they're asking for, and you're noticing that maybe there's something, an area that you can kind of an opportunity to improve on or just kind of gain that skill, that would be just the one other call out that I would make there. But otherwise,
I love that.
spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really big on strategic upskilling. A lot of times I see people wanting to make a career pivot, starting with like, what courses should I take? But if we start with, okay, where do you want to go? And then being very strategic, okay, what are the gaps there? What are the most important skills? You will never know every single software system out there, but what are the most common skills and experience you need? And then being very strategic. That way, in most cases, you don't have to go back to school for 5 years before you can make a transition. You can really be strategic about short courses that bridge those specific gaps. Going back to something that came up a little bit earlier, the topic of confidence, I am sure there are listeners here right now that feel like, okay, I understand the steps, but I don't have the confidence to do it. And a lot of times I see that when people come from unhealthy or toxic workplace dynamics, and that really leaves professionals questioning their abilities, making a career pivot feel even harder and riskier. Erica, how do you help clients rebuild their confidence and trust their instincts when they are planning a career move?
Yeah, this is a big one. And I will say that just from personal experience, that was one of the, I think the biggest challenges that I had to overcome was my confidence and owning my story. One of the big things that I hear, and it's a common theme, and this was in my own story as well, was that I felt like I had to justify, why I was making a change, or almost like I had to feel bad about the fact that, I had this different skill set that I was trying to transfer over, which the skills were transferable. But I tell people, you don't need permission. So there's a big notion around like, how are they going to perceive me? And breaking that down and asking, the question of why do you feel like you need permission to make the change that you're making? Because that barrier, that mindset shift, and being able to frame the narrative differently is huge. So the confidence part comes from, the story, like what story do I want to own? What's important to me? And really getting to focus on the person as an individual, not what other people think, not what that toxic coworker, used to tell them. What is it that I want for me, for my life? What do I enjoy doing? So what Eliana was saying about really sitting down with yourself and taking inventory and really understanding what are the parts of your experience that you've really enjoyed. And so doing that for yourself, that part of it is huge, because that in itself is going to give you the confidence. Like a lot of people don't ever, not ever, but don't take the time to sit down because we're constantly going and we don't take the time for ourselves. And that part of it is so powerful, because when you can do that, then that's going to start to give you that little boost of confidence that you need. And all you need is momentum. You need to just have one foot kind of in front of the other, take one step at a time, break it down so it doesn't feel so overwhelming, and into small manageable steps. Because when you do that, okay, I did this one thing, right? And maybe it's I did research on this one role that I'm interested in. Well, that's a sense of accomplishment. That's going to give you confidence. Maybe it's I had a conversation with somebody about a role that I'm interested in. That's going to give you confidence, and that's going to allow you to take that next step and that next step. So I tell people, break it down, but then also from the standpoint of just the fear around it, we don't need permission. You don't need permission to say, I want to change and make this change for my life. You don't have to justify why you're doing it. And regaining, kind of taking back that power. And then when you're going into conversations, then you can go in and have more powerful conversations where, like Eliana was saying, it's not about, my experience, and you're kind of meek about it, and maybe you're afraid to talk about your experience. It's, this is the experience that I have. And you're sitting tall and you're confident and saying, I'm bringing this experience. This is my value. This is where I, am able to shine, because I've been able to, do X, Y, Z in my previous role. So the confidence part really takes some time, because when you have been so kind of beat down and worn down, it takes time to rebuild. But part of it is taking the inventory, starting to see the areas that you excel and where you shine, and then starting to recognize that you deserve and you don't need permission. And when you do that and then you start breaking it down into manageable steps, that confidence is going to build on itself.
That is such a beautiful reminder that we don't need permission to change. We're in charge of our lives and our careers, and we don't need to wait for someone else to tell us, you're allowed to do this, or go and make the change. No, we can make that decision for ourselves. Eliana, is there something on the topic of confidence that you'd like to add?
And I think Erica just said all that so beautifully. And I think so often we feel like confidence is built over time. And like Erica said, it's all about taking small steps. And every time you take a small step, that will build a little bit more confidence. And as long as you just keep putting a foot in front of another, even when it feels really uncomfortable and it's really challenging, that in and of itself is how you build confidence. And then something else that like when I first kind of got into the world of personal and professional development, I remember learning this in a seminar that I went to, and was talking a lot about story versus fact, right? And in our lives, in our careers, we tend to live in the story versus the fact, but the story becomes the fact. So for example, something happens to you, like you get laid off from your job, right? The fact is that you were laid off. The story you then create as a result of that is, I'm not worthy, I'm not smart, I am not as good as everybody else on my team because of this fact that I got laid off. And the reason that our confidence erodes is because we spend so much time living in the story versus living in the fact. And we can always recreate the story, right? We can't recreate the facts, but we can recreate the story. So if you notice that you're in this place of, I'm not good enough to make a change, I'm compared to all these people, they're all better than me, they're all smarter than me. Ask yourself, how much of that is really factual and how much of that is my story? And can I reframe or recreate this story so that it feels more empowering for me? And just doing that gut check throughout of, am I living in the facts or am I living in the story? I find is like a really quick and helpful reframe when we're starting to get down on ourselves in that pivoting process.
That's an awesome exercise of sitting with ourselves and getting that clarity. Is what I'm telling myself really the facts? Yeah. Or was there a complete reason? Maybe I could have been the world's best employee, but circumstances were that my position got eliminated. And there's nothing I could have done better. And it's not my fault. And I have value and I bring a lot of experience and value into my new role. And this layoff does not define me.
Exactly.
Building on the topic of confidence, having a support system is something I strongly believe also helps you build the confidence. And career pivots can feel isolating. And sometimes we're surrounded by people, friends or family who don't really understand our decisions. What advice do you have, Eliana, for someone who wants to build a supportive network and have people that help them stay motivated when other people in their life doubt the path they're taking?
Yeah, it's really hard. And we're so influenced by the people around us. And sometimes you're lucky enough to have friends and family who are fully supportive, and sometimes you don't, and people question you, right? And I think obviously a big part of that, like you just said, is the confidence, right? If you know that this is the right thing for you, then it helps you block out some of that noise. But I think you have to then go out and seek out community that is supportive, right? And I think that even engaging in starting to have networking conversations with people who have made pivots in the past, either similar to the pivot you're making, or who maybe not similar to the pivot you're making, but they've just been through it, is a great way to find people who have done this. Like, you can always find evidence in other people who have done what you have done. And those are going to be really great people, supportive cheerleaders who are incredibly helpful. I think that we're so lucky to live in a world where there is so much community available to us at our fingertips in social circles, right? Or social networks. There's so many LinkedIn groups. I'm sure you can find a million LinkedIn groups with career pivoters. You can find Slack groups for literally any type of group out there, right? So just like doing a quick Google search on, people who are groups of people who have pivoted, or, people, or for like the specific area that you want to target, right? Again, if you're project managers, like Slack communities for project managers, and you can find community in that way. I think also just thinking about, again, as you think through friends and family, maybe you have some ideas, these people are not supportive versus this person is supportive. And then how do you kind of really help that person, or allow that person to help you create accountability, and maybe reaching out to them and just saying like, hey, I'm going through this. It's been really hard to find people who are supportive. I'm so appreciative of how supportive you've been. Is it okay if, I have you be an accountability buddy for me? And, every month or so we check in and I let you know how my progress is going. Sometimes it's just like, you have to put yourself out there and ask for that permission to be able to continue talking with those people about it, and just do your best to block out the noise from other people. Obviously, there are so many like coaching programs out there and masterminds, whether they're free or paid. There are just so many resources out there that are available to you if you seek it out to help you create that community if you're really craving it or feeling like you need it.
I love that. And I think we all need community. I'm someone who feels like I can work really well on my own, but the moment then I surround myself by people, it takes it to another level.
Yeah.
And I see that in so many people. They're like, oh, I can send out application by myself. I don't need a support system. But the motivation and the confidence and feeling empowered that comes from having conversations with others is incredible. And I just, as you were sharing this, I was thinking back to a very recent coaching call I had with my clients. And there was someone who said, like, I can't make this career change. Like, it's impossible to go from being in a finance role in this industry to a finance role into another industry. And I was like, well, let's just see on LinkedIn if we can find people who made such a change. And within a matter of 10 minutes, we found 2 people on LinkedIn who have made that transition. And it was such a big aha moment for her where she's like, whoa, if they did it, I can do that. I was like, yes. So sometimes you have a coach or someone telling you like, yes, it's possible, but you don't believe it till you see or even then talk to someone who has made that change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thought that came up is the Slack community that built around the 12 days of career goals has been the most positive surprise I've had in a very long time. Of the amount of support people share is incredible. It was like within a day, people were offering help to others, supporting others, cheering others on, being empowering, being empathetic, understanding each other's challenges. It's the most beautiful thing to see a community coming together and to see how much people want to help each other. And before we head into the Q&A section, and for the audience, if you have questions on making a career change, making a bold career pivot, transferable skills, drop them in the chat because we're going to have a Q&A section in just a moment. Before we go there, Erica, if you could leave the audience with one powerful mindset shift to reclaim their confidence and own their career pivot story in 2025, what would it be?
Yeah, this is one that somebody told me when I was going through my own career change and pivot. And the question I leave people with is, what is it costing you staying where you're at right now? And that pause and that awareness and actually taking time to think about what is the costing? Is it your time, your health? What are you feeling? Are you you're miserable in the role that you're in. You know that, you can't keep doing what you're doing. And granted, you may not have all the pieces, right? It's a puzzle that you have to put together. But what is it costing you to stay where you are? And then Eliana said something that was amazing, that, I typically will share is the fact, right? The story that you're telling yourself and what's fact. So telling yourself, I can't. Well, how do you know if you haven't done it, right? So what is the fact? What is the fact? What are the steps that you've taken? And maybe you have tried and maybe you didn't get there before, but time is different. The circumstance is different. So the fact versus the story, right? And that's a big piece of it. But I always tell people that part of, when somebody told me that in that moment, that the cost of me staying where I was, that changed everything. And I didn't know how I was going to make a career change at that time. And I literally was like, well, I'm just going to go, camp out and probably, like live in my car or something, because I don't know what I'm going to do and how I'm going to make this change. But I did it, and I'm on the other side of that saying, I see you. So whoever's watching this, like, I see you. I was you. And what is it costing you? And sit with that for a moment.
That is one powerful question, Erica. What is it costing you? We often are so focused on thinking, okay, what is the risk of making a career change? Am I going to take a pay cut? Am I facing imposter syndrome? Will I have to start over? But we rarely sit with the question, what is it costing me to stay where I am? And that really helps us make a much more balanced decision. Is it worth stepping outside my comfort zone and going in a new direction? is that costing me more, or is it costing me more staying where I am? And for a lot of people, especially when we thought back to toxic work environments, unhealthy work environments, roles, industries that aren't aligned, the cost is significant. It is mental health, physical health, our happiness, and it's time of our lives that we don't get back.
Very true.
Eliana, if you could leave the audience with one actionable piece of advice for them to carry into 2025, if someone now realized, like, yes, staying where I am is costing me too much. I do want to step outside my comfort zone and explore a new direction. What is the actionable piece that they can take into 2025 to when they consider their own career pivot?
So yeah, it's a great question. I think one thing that we touched on a little bit, but I think this is really important, especially now. I'm always very honest and very blunt in that I'll say that it's not necessarily an easy time to make a career pivot right now, right? Like, it's an incredibly challenging job market. I think anybody who is an active job seeker knows that and feels that. And therefore, when you then think about making a pivot, it can feel even more intimidating of, oh my gosh, it's a tough job market, and now I'm thinking about pivoting, right? So I think that forces all of us as pivoters to really think through, how can I be the most strategic about it? And when we talk about an actionable step to take, what I first want to say is like an actionable step that you should not take. And that is deciding, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm pivoting into. Now I'm going to devote hours of my week, every single week, just sending as many applications as I can online, right? That is not a good use of your time. It is not effective. And I always tell people, if you have to think about it from a hiring manager's perspective, if I am a hiring manager or I am a recruiter and I am looking at two resumes in front of me, I don't know anything about these two people other than their resumes that I am looking at. And one has a traditional experience I'm looking for, and one has, I see some of the experience, but it's more non-traditional and it's not as direct. Who am I going to go to? I'm going to go with the more traditional applicant, right? And that's not because you as a pivoter aren't highly qualified and will be great in your role, but when they are evaluating you based on a piece of paper, they are going to go with the safer bet. So when you think about going into 2025 and making a pivot, don't focus on applying. Focus on building relationships with the people who have made those pivots, with the people who are in the roles that you want for yourself. Develop the relationships, get the face time, because that is a necessity to make a pivot in 2025, rather than focusing on just let me apply to hundreds and hundreds of places. So I think that would be my actionable thing to think about.
100%. And I'm so with you on this, Eliana. And even if you're meeting the qualifications and are more of a traditional candidate, the odds that 1 out of 200, 500, 1,000 resumes sometimes that they're picking you out for interview, that is not just from the odds a game I would want to play.
Right.
It's just, that would mean you sending out thousands of applications, and then the random one that you get picked out for an interview, is that really one that you're interested in? Right. Having conversations is the way to go. I mean, I think we all see that with our clients, that is what opens doors. Humans hire humans. And when we have conversations, we're now having a foot in the door, and they know who we are. They know the value. And that makes everything so much easier. And for any of our listeners who missed yesterday we talked about networking. So you can go back to the networking session from day 3 and get actionable steps on how to have those networking conversations. And now we want to go into Q&A because we've gotten so many great questions. Let's start with the community question here. The first one that I see is, what about if your community is supportive, but don't know how to help? Are there specific tips for tapping into your network when it's not immediately clear how they can help?
If your community is supportive but don't know how to help, are there tips when it's not immediately clear and how they can help? I think that, look, I'm a believer that all conversations are helpful in some way, whether it directs you in the right direction or it confirms for you a direction that you don't want to go, right? And I think sometimes, like, as we were discussing, just having conversations with people, sharing your story, putting that out there, all of that helps you build confidence. So I think that if, there's somebody you're looking at and you're like, I don't really know if this person can be helpful or supportive. I don't really know exactly what they can do for me, right? Or if they can do anything for me. I say just go and have the conversation, right? And get comfortable sharing, this is what I'm looking to do. This is what I'm looking to achieve. Again, even if you speak to that person and there's no way that they can benefit you or there's no value exchange that can happen in that moment, you will gain confidence just through sharing your story. And you would be surprised because maybe they can't directly help you, but maybe they know somebody who can, right? Like I'm such a big believer that like any relationship building or networking conversation is fruitful in some way, even if it doesn't feel directly fruitful in that moment. So I would say just go for it and don't worry so much about like, can this person specifically help me right now? Just go out and have conversations and see where those conversations lead you.
I love that. And I'm so big on clarity, of being clear about where you want to go, because that gives people the tools to help you. If you communicate, okay, this is the role industry I'm targeting, that already sets the stage for others to be able to help you. And then invite them into the brainstorming of like, okay, this is the direction I would go. Do you have ideas what I can do? Do you know anyone? And as you said, Eliana, there's so often times when I hear from people, clients, friends who are like, I never thought that this person could help me, but I shared with them what I want to do. And then she said like, oh yeah, my neighbor's son's wife, she works at this company. I should totally make that introduction. And it's those really unexpected connections you never saw coming that then lead to conversations that are incredibly helpful.
Exactly. The more people that know you're looking for a job, the more opportunities become available. Like literally, I say, tell everyone and their mother, like you talk to someone, you tell them what you're looking to do. The more people that know that, the more that can help you.
Yes. 100%. And what I remind my clients about all the time is we always think everyone else knows what we want to be doing or what we do for work.
Mhm.
But in reality, they actually don't. They're like, well, I know she's a kind of an HR, I think. And she's probably looking for something in that direction, but they actually don't know. So communicating that over and over is so important. Next question that we get, and I think this is a great one. How much of an impact to your income did you experience? Maybe that was specifically for Erica. How much of an impact to your income did you experience?
I actually did not take a hit negatively. Actually, it was a positive. For me personally, I was able to pivot into tech and specifically in recruiting. And so in tech and recruiting, I actually was able to meet where I was at. And then with the bonus structure that was in place, I actually came out ahead. And I know that that's a big concern, right? When you think about making a career pivot, where it's like, there are times where you're wondering, am I going to have to jeopardize and take a hit to my compensation? And that is a real question that people have. And so but I think for anyone who's concerned about that, one of the biggest things that I would advise is that understanding the market is really important. So I know Eliana earlier had talked about market research. So part of market research, yes, it's exploring roles, but realistically, from a salary standpoint, market research also, you want to look at the factors like salary, total compensation. And so breaking down for you what's important in terms of where I'm at now. And for me, is it more about the move, the pivot itself? Do I need to stay within a certain salary bracket? So these are things to consider, and then doing the market research to understand realistically what can I anticipate in terms of making a career move and how that might impact me. So those were some of the things that, as I was doing my own personal research and just kind of working with others now, I would go through that exercise of exploring that. But personally, I actually came out in a really great position and grateful for that.
Thanks for sharing that. And it's something I see with a lot of clients who are so afraid about taking a pay cut when making a change. And in the end, they're actually making more than they made before. Obviously, everyone's situation is different. It very much depends on the role and industry. But what a lot of people forget is the amount of experience they have that can be valued in different positions or roles. And it's not, you're not throwing it away and starting over, but as we talked about with the transferable skills and how you tell your story, is when you others see the value of your experience, there is a very good chance and likelihood that you will be compensated for this. Now we have two specific questions here about VP roles. So the first one is how to strategically pivot to another industry when I have VP status in another industry at this time. Is it starting from the bottom again? And the second question, I'll read that out too, but let's leave this one blended into on the screen. The example is VP status in the film industry and looking to pivot into estate management or high-level construction management. So from one VP in one industry to VP in a different industry.
It's a good question. I think that obviously when you get to the level of VP, so much of it is obviously around your leadership experience, right? And I think that if you're pivoting from one VP role to another VP role, while yes, there's obviously, and Erica spoke about this before, like skill gaps that you have to understand and identify when you're moving to another industry and figure out how you can compensate for that. But if you already have those leadership skills and abilities, I would really focus on like leaning into the leadership experience that you have and showcasing again, like the soft and transferable skills that go into that, right? Like managing a team and being able to develop camaraderie and, you know, how things are handled from the top down, right? Like think about kind of like what are all the soft skills that go into being a VP and how do I really hammer in on this while also then thinking about, okay, well, what are my specific skill gaps or knowledge gaps when it comes to this industry that I'm targeting and how do I fill those? But my guess would be that if you're already somewhat clear on the industries that you want to target instead, again, going back to what Erica said earlier, that there is then a catalyst for that. So there might be some levels of indirect experience that you have, which are making you want to target those industries. So you might already have some of that experience. Again, obviously don't know the ins and outs of your situation, but I think if you're already a VP, you're well positioned and I'd focus on like the leadership experience that you do have.
100% agree with this. And the follow-up question that came through with it is, how would I reflect my transferable skills on my resume without it causing a red flag? So same example for the VP.
Mm-hmm. Erica, you want to take this?
Yeah.
I have thoughts.
And so VP in film industry and looking to pivot into estate management, high-level construction management. So how would you highlight, okay, without causing a flag? So in terms of highlighting, definitely, as Eliana was saying, focusing on the leadership impact in terms of how you're positioning your experience, because at that level, they really want to know that you can lead teams, you understand high level scope of what organizational goals are, and that you're able to deliver against those goals. Like that's really what they're going to be looking at. And in terms of the industry experience itself, so if there are opportunities, and I actually can give an example, very recently for somebody who made a pivot from education into real estate at an executive level. So one of the things that she was able to leverage in her conversations was the fact that she personally has experience in real estate because of the fact that she, outside of her 9-to-5 role, has multiple Airbnb rentals essentially that she owns. And so she's going through that process of like understanding and being able to speak to that in interviews and conversations really helped her leveraging that and anchoring that. So I guess one of question I would have is there something in your experience in terms of in film? I don't know if you've had to work within construction at all or had to go in and scope out, places for filming and kind of like how can you tie those transferable skills together? That would be something I would also, see if you can position some of that in your resume, because the goal is that you're telling the story, but in terms of bridging the gap, there's going to be a way that I'm curious to know, and again, more context would be great to kind of give a further depth answer on this, but I'm sure there's something in your experience that you can help kind of bridge that gap if you've had to work, with real estate agencies, if you are having, like, those are things that you can put into a resume to help tell that story. So that's kind of where my mind is going. But Eliana, I would love to hear your input as well.
No, I completely agree with all of that. It's like, yeah, like what can you do to bridge that gap? And I think too, like kind of going back to focusing on the resume and the red flags, again, another reason why, especially for a VP level, you never want to put yourself in a position where you're just making this transition and like you're sending in your resume, right? Because red flags will always stand out more on a resume. My son's trying to come in the room. Red flags will always stand out more on a resume versus if you as a VP have spoken to somebody in this industry that you're interested in, or you have you've developed a relationship with somebody at the company you're interested in, and you've been able to like explain away those red flags. That will de-emphasize them when looking at the resume, right? But if like the first time they're ever seeing you and being introduced to you is only via your resume, that makes it a little bit more challenging, right? So I would focus on like, how do I develop relationships to make inroads at the places that I am interested in targeting so that I have the opportunity to tell my story first and foremost and be able to share those bridges between the disconnects between what I've been doing and what I want to be doing versus just kind of, putting on your resume, crossing your fingers and hoping for the best.
100%. Erica and Eliana, I agree with both of what you shared so much. And especially at every level when we're making a pivot, it comes down to networking and the conversations we have. But the higher the ladder we go, the more important it is. Not a lot of VP roles, and I'm curious if you agree, not a lot of VP roles are filled just by a resume. I don't know how many VPs are hired based on just a piece of paper. I've never heard of one.
Same. At that level, it's not going to be, we're not just going to open it up and there's going to be internal people going for that role. There'll be external referrals, right? It's very rare that that's going to be filled through just like putting it out on LinkedIn and hoping you get a really great candidate that way.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. There might be one in a million, but it's not going to be the norm. So having the conversations and telling your story, and especially when we're looking at this question, pivoting into estate management or high-level construction management, it seems there's a real interest there. And I always encourage people to really lean into this interest. So if you're super interested in estate management, well, then having conversations with people who work in estate management, wouldn't that be the best thing in the world? Of like, you have a shared interest, you're really curious about it, get to know them. And that's your bridge into those roles.
Yeah.
Now we have a really specific question, and if I'll bring it up on the screen. What do you recommend about career pivoting while moving country where your language skills are not up to par for where you wish to move? I can also jump in on that. I don't know if you have worked with people moving internationally.
Yeah, I can jump in just kind of on some of the experiences that I have worked with people on. So in terms of language skills, one of the big things I would say is the connections. So an example that I can give is that recently I was working with somebody who was VP of data for a bank that he ended up going to Dubai for. But essentially, there was a specific language requirement that they were looking for. And so he was trying to kind of break through, and there were specific companies he wanted to work for. That being able to identify people and find people that you can connect with and to network is important. One thing I would also say is that if you can identify agencies locally, so like recruitment agencies is a good way as well, and build some relationships there. A lot of times they're there to champion and help you. And then in terms of the actual language barrier, one of the things that you'll want to be transparent about is, the language part of it, but then you really want to talk about what your value add is. So that's going to be the biggest component that I've seen people with success is like, if you can solve a problem for them and you can identify their problem, like one of their big pain points, and you are able to talk about how you can solve that problem, that language barrier, that gap there is not going to be as big, because they want people that can come in and essentially fix the problems that they have. And so the biggest point that I would say is know where you want to go in terms of companies that maybe you want to work for. Very specifically, I would say be very clear on the roles that you're targeting, and then being able to identify what problems do these companies have if they have roles that are open, and how you're able to solve those problems. And then if you can do that and you can also build networking connections, that's going to allow for opportunities, to come your way, and being able to make those pivots. Excuse me. I've helped a lot of people make transitions from like US internationally, but then also from like even from Africa into Europe and things like that. So those are the biggest, I would say, opportunities that I would say propose in terms of like how to approach that.
Absolutely love that, Erica. And I personally, I'm originally from Germany. I've lived and job searched and worked in Germany, in Ireland, in Australia, and in the US. So from my personal experience, as well as working with clients who move internationally, I 100% agree with what you shared. And I always recommend about talking about the language gap, not as a negative of I don't speak this language, but as a positive of I'm learning this language. And these are the things I'm doing to improve every day. And then again, as you said, is knowing what the problem is they're looking to solve and building relationships. I think it comes down to the same thing when we talked about the chances that your resume is going to be picked out of a stack when there is a language gap is low. But the moment you have a conversation, you talk to them and they get to know you, they're like, wow, this person is who we're looking for. And I see he or she is learning the language. I have no doubt that 3 months from now, 6 months from now, she's going to be up to par with the language requirement. But she, more important, this is the person to solve the problem they're hiring for.
Yeah.
Before we end this absolutely incredible conversation, and I'm so grateful that I was able to talk about that career pivoting with both of you today. I know our audience wants to connect with you, ask more questions, follow you. Erica, let's start with you. Where can people connect with you, find you, learn more from you?
Yes. So LinkedIn is a great place. So Rivera-Erica is one way you can find me. Also on social media. So you can find me on LinkedIn, I guess technically can be social media, but social media in terms of Instagram, TikTok as well. So at Career Diva Coaching. And then on Glassdoor as well. You can find me under Work Life Pros, and my profile is under Erica Rivera.
Love it. And you, Eliana, where can people connect with you, Eliana? Where can they find you and follow you?
Well, I'm sorry for the background noise. And if you saw me, my kids literally just got home. So they're like banging on my door. Now they're playing on kazoos and it's so loud. So hopefully nobody can hear that. But similar to Erica, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Eliana Goldstein. Also on Instagram, it's Eliana_Goldstein. And social media is kind of the best bet if you want to shoot me a DM or shoot me a message. My messages are always open, or you can connect with me through my website, which is just elianagoldsteincoaching.com. So wherever is best for you.
And I highly recommend to follow Eliana and Erica. You both have a huge following on Instagram and TikTok, and you share so much incredible advice, amazing resources. So for anyone listening in, make sure that you follow Erica and Eliana on any of the platforms that you regularly visit. You're going to get a ton of value out of this. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Eliana, for both of you, for being here, for being part of the 12 Days of Career Goals, and sharing so much wisdom and actionable advice with our audience.
Of course. Thank you for having us. This was so fun. And this whole event has been so incredible. Like, kudos to you for putting on something so amazing and so helpful.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for this very powerful conversation on making a bold career pivot without starting over. Again, a huge thank you to our two incredible speakers, Eliana and Erica, for sharing their strategies and wisdom on how to transition into new fields with confidence and clarity. And as we shared in this session, career clarity really is the foundation to making such a successful career change. It is your compass in identifying your transferable skills, reframing your career story, and navigating the challenges of making a change. When you understand the value you bring and align your next steps with your goals, the pivot feels less like a leap and more like a smart strategic move. Before we leave today, I want us to turn the insights into actions. So here are 3 steps I want you to take. First of all, reflect and write down the strategies that inspired you most in today's session in your 12 Days of Career Goals guidebook. Then take action. Identify one concrete step you will take to start building your pivot, whether it's identifying your transferable skills, reaching out to a mentor, or researching new industry. And write that action step in your guidebook. When we write something down, we are so much more likely to follow through. And last but not least, join the conversation. Continue sharing your ideas and questions in our Slack community. The link is in your emails, and we really are here to support each other in this exciting journey. Don't forget to join us back here tomorrow for day 5 of the 12 Days of Career Goals, where we'll be talking about managing up and setting boundaries in the workplace. You won't want to miss it. See you tomorrow. And that's a wrap on today's session of the 12 Days of Career Goals. Whether you're dreaming of a career change, aiming for a big promotion, or just looking to take the next step with confidence, I hope today's insights sparked some inspiration and gave you the tools to make it happen. Before you go, take a moment to share your biggest takeaway in our Slack community. Your reflections might just inspire someone else. And if you have questions for upcoming sessions, post them there so we can tackle what matters most to you. And if you haven't already, be sure to register for the rest of this free online conference at bit.li/12 Days of Career Goals. Thank you for spending time with us today. Together, we're making career goals achievable, one step at a time. I will see you back here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern for another incredible session.